Aloha, everyone. Vo Meliana Aluli Meyer Kia, He Kikyo Kia Nane. I am very privileged this afternoon, this evening, to have a conversation with a beloved friend. And as I'm introducing him, I want you to know that you can read about all of his, as we say, street cred, his bio, etc. But most importantly, you need to know that he's a friend. Solomon, aloha to you. We're so happy to have this time to be with you. I've known you for a very long time, you know, half your life anyway, almost. And I can say, young man, that it's not only a privilege, but people need to know that, you know, as another artist speaking to our community of creatives, to know you and to believe in your work and to understand the facility within which you work is just really a privilege for anybody to know you in that regard. So I just want to take a moment and just let folks know, if you don't know, Solomon is possibly one of the most engaging, extraordinary futurists in not only our community of artists, but in the Hawaiian community. So his voice tonight, as he speaks about Polyfantastica, is not only aspirational to me, but possibly, most importantly, not only a visionary voice, but a voice that portends cautionary tales. So tonight, I really introduce with great joy, Solomon, and gratitude for just giving me the chance to work with you and be with you again. Good to see you, brother.
Oh, wow. Boy, my goodness, Meliana. Oh, you know, I really have to lay the foundation, which is, you know, I'm just pula. I'm just a little new shoot coming up out of the ground, and the tilth, the health of the soil really is it's because of good soil management that our kupuna, that our leaders, our alaka'i, like Meliana has, you know, the work that they've done allows for, you know, abundance, just abundance in every sense. And, you know, it's, I feel like I'm the tip of a spear, just a very singular point, but I feel the weight of that momentum behind me. And it's, you know, really, it's that long enduring effort that Meliana has been putting into the community. But yeah, Kalamai, I really have to, I'm a mirror to reflect back all to you and communities you represent, Meliana, and we are all part of it.
Kako, isn't it? Isn't it a kako? We've worked with so many extraordinary people, Solomon. So mahalo for your kindness. So if we think about Polyfantastica as a graphic novel, it's so much more than that. It's kind of like a mindset. So folks who don't know about Polyfantastica, can you, I mean, it began with this simple question, and the question that you asked in your work and have answered is, what would have happened if Hawaii was never interrupted? And I find that such a profound question because it is played out, it is drawn out in your art. Is that still the question that Polyfantastica wants to answer? Or as you say, there's a parallel universe developing here. Please just, could you address the beginnings of Polyfantastica and we can just take it as a progression? Thank you.
So Polyfantastica started out with a simple question: what would happen if Hawaii was never interrupted? Now that question has evolved, and it really is what would happen if all of our elder cultures, all of our native cultures, all of our indigenous cultures were left to thrive. And it's really just a what if that grew out of, that's the favorite sound I used to make as a kid growing up. My mom and dad would always say, that was your favorite word. What if, what if, what if, what if? And now what it became is, and then what? And then what happened? And then what happened? And so the word Polyfantastica, originally it was Polynesian centric because, you know, being part Hawaiian, part Japanese, Chinese, Russian, Polish, German, you know, Portuguese, you know, all of this mixed together was really kind of like, I wanted to tell traditional values from Hawaii and spread them around the world. And I wanted to use an allegory, visual allegory was a 40,000 year timeline, beginning from a point where a native people woke up. Oops. There were no sails on the horizon. There was no foreigner, nobody showing up to tell them to do anything differently, nobody bringing disease, nobody bringing any of those sort of things. And instead, people went and got along with it. To me, that's a really powerful and healing message. And I honestly want everybody to come up with their own Polyfantastica. And so at the very beginning, as it happened, Polyfantastica began, the first foundation were 40 of these millennial figures. So each one of these figures, I came up with them, they represent the most important archetype or the most important figure every 1,000 years. So I said, if I make 40 of them, then if I can, from these figures, you can infer 40,000 years. It's as if, look at our own history. What would be the most important figure from the year 2000 to 1 to 2000? So you might have maybe a prophet, and then you would have an astronaut, and then you would have, well, what's next? What is the most important figure 1,000 years from now? And then what? And then what? And then what? And then what? And what I began to do as I began to flesh this out, I'm going to move to the next image. Okay. We've jumped ahead. I think the previous two images were the year 7 and 8 millennium. This is now the 15th and 16th millennium. So human beings have actually transcended everything that we understand as right and wrong, good and evil. All of that is like, there's a whole new categories of ways of thinking about what it means to be kind, what it means to be evil, what it means to be good, and all these different sort of things. And it really makes me feel like we are just on the, we are such an adolescent species, like we're still in the womb. We're still gestating as a species. We have all these amazing forms yet to transform into. And, effectively, Polyfantastica is sort of like, what J.R.R. Tolkien did. By the way, I grew up reading the Silmarillion at night and then going with my dad guys into the mountain and farming taro and talking about Kalo culture during the day. And by the way, Silmarillion is Tolkien's creation myth. It's how he told the story of how the Hobbit and Gandalf and all these other characters came to be from a Finnish mythologies based upon the Scandinavian mythologies. And I said, oh, I'm going to borrow that. But instead of using words, I'm going to map this out visually. So I created basically 40 of these images. And each one of these images, again, represented 1,000 years and then 1,000 years later. And as it happened, what you're seeing, this series of 40 images, 40 figures, I actually started it during a stay that I had opportunity to stay over at the John Charlot house in Kahala area. Like it just so happened I could stay a few days there, or actually about a week there, and I was working in his studio, and I laid all these out, and I had actually started working on them there. So strange beginnings for things, but of course, Charlot has always been influenced. I've always been influenced by his sense of form and design, but really it's a fusion of Hawaiianness and outsideness, and that's kind of where a lot of my designs really come from, a place of trying to bridge the kinds of things that I grew up, science fiction that I grew up with Hawaiian culture. Tolkien meets Hawaiian culture. Frank Herbert meets Hawaiian culture. Isaac Asimov meets Hawaiian culture. So, and then of course later it began to be indigenous science fiction more than just Hawaiian science fiction. To really open it up to say that everybody is part of this narrative, this indigenous narrative of kind of like rebooting what it means to be human. So that's kind of like the first of my 4 parts, and I've probably gone way over on the time I wanted to allocate. But this was the beginnings of Polyfantastica. It started with 40 figures, and each figure representing 1,000 years.
Okay, then I really want you to speak to folks so that they understand that this notion of prescience, as in seeing future. People don't really understand the function of an artist. And I really want folks not only to understand the story of Polyfantastica, but more about you as an artist, as a visionary, because visionaries foretell the future. And you were speaking about pandemics, way back in 2001, if I'm not mistaken. So, it's a foreboding in a way that this pandemic is kind of being realized through your work in a strange way. And it's, people could be a little bit frightened about it. But I want you to kind of speak to this kuleana and responsibility then of speaking to the future. Do you feel your images are speaking to the future, invoking the future, paralleling the future? Because you spoke about this years ago, by the way, my dear. So you could help folks understand that tie, or the bridge of Polyfantastica to today. Sure. I'd appreciate that. Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. So originally Polyfantastica, when it was a little bit more Polynesian centric, it really began with Europeans having, in a parallel Earth, on a sister Earth, decimated. So we actually have this mass pandemic that wipes out most of the world's surface. And Hawaii, because it was so isolated, becomes just by default, because there's nobody else here. So the human race has to re-begin, but from the Pacific. And it becomes a Pacific-centric world. It would be technology as if, our ancestors, we began to then dictate what technology is, and the kind of dictate technologies that get moved into the future. And even towards, even before the pandemic, I was kind of evolving this narrative to be like, there's definitely in this world that I'm working on, there was definitely some sort of pandemic. So there were some ships that would arrive in the Pacific, and some of the major cultures in this world were decimated, but not all indigenous peoples on Earth were set back. So you did have some other kingdoms or other societies left to live on. And so I really wanted to move the shift away from just Hawaiians repopulating the Earth to it being closer to be a little bit of all indigenous cultures are left to repropagate the Earth. Having survived some of these biological, some of the impacts of biology, but we don't really see the but right on that note, I'm gonna jump right into a couple more images here. This image here is another series that I did much more recently. Now, maybe about 2 years ago. One thing we'll know is that because I've been working on this work for about 16 some odd years, I've evolved. You can see the progression of me as an artist evolve. Sit down and draw 400 anythings, you will develop a style. 400 drawings will change you. And so this is a character from the first year in Polyfantastica. I basically redid the archetype. So now I did 40 of these figures, but they're not in color, they're just in pencil. But they're millennial figures. It's like a redux of the millennial figure idea. So I created one of these figures for every 1,000 years. This is a priest, this is a war priest from the first millennium, from the first 100 years, in fact. And basically, it's a time when we actually have major wars that are going on in this parallel Pacific. One of the things I kind of wanted to be really important about this is that I don't want to over-romanticize Hawaiian or any indigenous cultures. All people do stupid things, but our capacity for destruction is now exponential. As soon as we have, nuclear warheads that could end all life on Earth, we're talking about new calibers of stupidity, of unbelievable and kind of unacceptable. And so basically I use these images to plot points on a chronological map that says, this is reasons why we make sacrifices in our lifetime. because the future deserves. It's almost like future worship. It's almost like these other times yet to happen deserve the right to exist, deserve the right to. And there's a tiny little mantra, and it kind of came from this, is that how much do we love our grandchildren and their grandchildren and their grandchildren and their great 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 great. And so this, I can basically run that track like for about a couple hours of just saying like, and then I realized I'm gonna shoot my love out into time and space in every direction, into the past and into the future as far as I can imagine it. Wow, I just feel great. I feel like, ooh, my love is everywhere, right? I'm all throughout space and time and all through all dimensions. I may not be the person that solves the mysteries of Neptune, but my love is gonna be part of that. It's gonna be one Lego block on top of this pillar of, you know, that gets us there. And so, you know, basically mapping how we evolved away from warfare and how we learned to talk to planets. And this is what's really important. We ask the universe, can we enter? Just like our kupuna ask before we enter into a space. So it is an indigenous perspective on we should never colonize anything ever again, right? We rethink this idea of instead of fighting with the mystery, we're dancing with the mystery. And I think that's an important distinction. This image here that I'm showing, I also did a series of artifacts. I created one artifact for every 1,000 years. The 40,000 year timeline, the 40 archetypes that I just showed, and the 40 artifacts, they're all available as PDF downloads on my website. So this is, this is kind of a shameless plug, but it is what it is. This is why, but I don't really, if you really like it, you guys have my complete permission to copy the PDF and share it. So to steal this book, wasn't that a thing from the the 70s or 60s? But you know, it's basically take it because I want everybody to plant their own Polyfantastica. And I'll go a little bit more, if I have enough time, I'll go into what the future of it is. But I'm gonna jump right into the next image. This is where Polyfantastica is now. And the future part is I'm gonna jump on it. But right now, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just jump on social media and I'm gonna use it as an open drawing board, an open sketchbook. I'm gonna actually continue to share little piece. I'm gonna jump around on my 40,000 year timeline. I'm gonna be in a deep space in one day, and the next day I'm gonna be back home, you know, on these islands. I'm gonna be all over. I'm gonna jump over this timeline wherever I feel most interested in. That's where I'm gonna visit in this 40,000 year timeline. Here we have a navigator at a time when humans or beings are dreaming themselves across the stars. Pele dreamed herself from Hawaii Island to Kauai. So I was just saying, if we can dream from island to island, then we can dream from stars to stars.
Star to star. Fabulous.
That perfect segue, right? For me, you know, I was like, oh, that makes complete sense. And so now I basically I'm self-publishing a free zine, you know, basically a coffee table book, you know, of images. Every day I come up with like about a couple paragraphs of text just to contextualize it. I'll say, oh, this series, you know, I'll do like, basically I do a series of 4s. So every day I'll post a new image on my social media. So that's at Solomon Enos. I'll post a new image and it'll be, what was I just doing? The city seeds. I just finished the series today. I just posted it about a couple hours before we got on. And it's seeds that are planted into the ground that turn into cities. I have an example of it. Right? I'll just showing it in just a little bit.
Super.
And so this is another image of human beings creating these instruments that when they play it, it turns the entire planet into an instrument. And the planet starts to make sound that resonates. And all the other planets in that star system turn into instruments. They start making these sounds and noises. And eventually, whole star systems begin to reorganize themselves. And it's all part of awakening this great galactic consciousness, which eventually, when the galaxy reconfigures itself, it's in the shape of this giant woman. And as she sings, all the other galaxies will awaken. And that'll just be the beginning. Because then there's like pan-galactic forms, anyway, it goes on and on and on. And then what? And then what happened? And that's all, as you can see, it becomes Polyfantastica. It becomes stories without end.
Unless we speak our aspirations and our hopes, nothing really can be realized other than what is absolute, what is real. So the fact that you have this extraordinary gift, Saul, of being able to help all of us along in these amazing ways, this notion of having 400, a macro collaboration, 400 other artists as well, and writers and filmmakers and other futurists is really so ambitious. And it takes somebody like you to put these book covers end to end together to allow us even the possibility of thinking. But I can tell you, it's challenging because what you give us, Salamangelo, as I've always called you, is so much to think about, and it's actually intimidating. So I want you to know that as another artist, I'm humbled by your visions, because we want to participate, a lot of people, but we don't. You've got the book covers, the front and the end, but maybe it's, and I appreciate that you have these other additional pieces, but I'm going to challenge you because there's so many who would possibly want to participate, but it's difficult to figure out how to enter.
Absolutely.
And I'm not sure, my dear friend, because these are so prodigious. And so you mentioned artifact before, and you mentioned, objects and things, and you've shown us some of those. So maybe that's another way in. And do you think maybe through your mural work, it also is an interface for this kind of work, or is that a totally different category of outreach? What do you think about that?
In Polyfantastica, people go outside and paint their walls all the time. So one of the things, basically, in this world, I get to kind of create these completely idealized situations where in Polyfantastica, everybody is their own artist. So art, there is no art class, but instead art is a part of every discipline. So basically, Polyfantastica, everybody should do world building, basically world growing. Actually, I think it's just a better word. So I would invite anyone to do a test, come up with a list of the most important figures in human history every 1,000 years. So you got 40,000 years. You're gonna have to go back, do some prehistory stuff, or just make it up. And so by doing that, it causes us to ask strategic questions about what is the most important values that we see in humanity and in humanity. And I think what I really would love for people to do is to find their own Polyfantastica. And I think by that, then they'll kind of get a sense of how they can get involved in this Polyfantastica. But no matter what, Polyfantastica is broken into 400 pieces. So even if they found one of 400 and they wanted to make a book out of it, awesome. But just make sure they listen to all the other 399 books being made at the same time.